So the sand has settled after the Bahrain Grand Prix, and it's time for the driver ratings, and we'll start with the race winner, Max Verstappen. Yeah, absolutely brilliant race weekend from him overall, wasn't it? He was fastest in qualifying, and that's where we probably thought that's where they might be in a bit of trouble, but he managed to pull off the race, the pace there, and get that pole. And in the race, he was just phenomenal, wasn't he? Unbelievable, untouchable. A 10 out of 10 for Max Verstappen. Next up, his teammate was 1-2, Sergio Perez. Yeah, it's hard to judge. He had a poor qualifying, I suppose, wasn't he? Finished in 5th. He was half a second down on Max Verstappen, and then in the race he was running about a second to 0.8 of a second down on his teammate Max, and he's not really made the move that we thought he would, did we? The only good thing about that was a decent move on George Russell and Charles Leclerc, but with that car being so dominant that we've seen in the hands of Max Verstappen, he's kind of expected a little bit better. So I'm going to go for, it's going to sound a bit harsh, but a 6 out of 10 to be honest, but considering he was so far off Max Verstappen's pace, and he's the one really high hope that we've got to take the battle up to the front for the championship, haven't we? In 3rd place, Carlos Sainz, and he had a fantastic race, didn't he? 4th place for qualifying. I think he'll be disappointed with that, but in the race he was absolutely phenomenal. 2 brilliant moves on Charles Leclerc, a nice move on George Russell also straight after that. I'm going to give him a 10 out of 10 because I thought that was brilliant. A bit of pressure on him almost, but he's taken it well, this getting kicked out of the Ferrari. He's really just going to go for himself, and he's proved what a fantastic racer he is. Yeah, fantastic race weekend from him, can't fault him. Next up then was his teammate Charles Leclerc, who finished in 4th place, and I think he'll be disappointed after a 2nd place start. He had the lap for pole position but just didn't do it in the Q3 session, did he? And overall I think he's the one that's probably the most disappointed out of this weekend. He had a poor race early doors. He was slow, made the move early on, second half of the race, where he managed to scramble back and got into that 4th place again. But yeah, sort of a race weekend where he'd kind of hoped for more. Just didn't really show on promise. I'm going to go for a 7 out of 10 for Charles Leclerc, and only because he managed to pull back and get that 4th place, and I think that might even be a bit generous. In 5th place is George Russell for the Mercedes team. A decent weekend, I suppose. His qualifying was fantastic, wasn't it? Q3 really outdid that car. In the race he was decent though, actually, wasn't it? It's a shame that he had that mistake that let Charles Leclerc past him, and possibly that might have happened anyway, but I think because of that it would be disappointing where he's making these mistakes and losing positions, key positions really, and that's what would really propel him, where he could have, if he'd held on to that, and a 4th place would have been absolutely brilliant from him, I think. But yeah, just that mistake sort of really let him down. So I'm going to go for a 7 out of 10 for George Russell in 5th place. Next up in 6th place was Lando Norris. It was a solid race weekend from McLaren in the end. It's Bahrain where they've kind of notoriously struggled, and yeah, he was not miles off the pace in qualifying, whether it was so close, just half a second from, like I said, from P1 to P9 in that qualifying, so a bit more out of the lap and he could have been way further up and it would look much better. In the race he did a good job, just didn't have enough pace to pass George Russell, but did well to hold off Lewis Hamilton, and I think he did a strong race overall with what that package has had, and I think it gives him some promises. We've done decent in a race where they knew they'd struggle, and you probably hope to be much further ahead in the next races where it kind of suits their car a bit better. But yeah, they've had the whole week sort of off season to sort of niggle out these problems, where we've seen last season where they struggle at certain tracks and do well at certain tracks. They kind of want to have a car like Red Bull where they are just good overall, and they've not sort of found that package at all. But for Lando Norris, I'm going for a 7 out of 10 because I thought that was a pretty decent job from him. In 7th place, Lewis Hamilton. He had a horrible weekend. Started in 9th, qualifying wasn't good at all. In the race he was got stuck behind the McLaren. He finally made a move on Fernando Alonso. Mistake when he was closing down Lando Norris, and that cost him about half a second on towards the end, and maybe that might have been enough. He'd been with a sniff of the DRS, he might have got in there and potentially could have made that move on him. overall, I think it's kind of a weekend to forget for Lewis Hamilton. I think he can be promised about how the car might be decent in certain ways, but they had some reliability issues, issue with the battery, issue with the power unit heating on George Russell. So yeah, 4 out of 10 for Lewis Hamilton for this weekend. Oscar Piastri next up. He started 8th and finished 8th in the end. I think he'll be happy with his weekend because he was there or thereabouts with Lando Norris through most of that race. He'll be disappointed with the team strategy and he got undercut by Lewis Hamilton, but otherwise I think he had enough to finish in that 7th place. Much happier from him. I think he is now the one where, you know, he needs to step on it a little bit, but he was closer to Lando Norris in the race, and that's probably one of his weak points, wasn't it, from last season, so it looks like he's getting on top of that a little bit. I'm going for a 6 out of 10 for Oscar Piastri. There was a 9th place finish for Fernando Alonso in the end, and yeah, he'll be disappointed. He was way down on the McLarens, got passed by the Mercedes, and then they had a race of their own, didn't they? They were faster than the guys behind them, but just not quite fast enough for the guys up ahead of them. And much like we're seeing at the end of last season, they've not really made the progress that we kind of hoped they would. But race pace just wasn't good enough for him. A 7 out of 10 for Fernando Alonso. Next up is Lance Stroll, and he finished in 10th place. He had a poor qualifying session, didn't he? Started in 12th place, and then from there on his race was just scuppered at lap 1, last in the end, and then but a decent recovery down and getting the point in the end. 18 seconds off his teammate, but I think really that's down to just being a massively compromised strategy. Decent recovery. I'm giving him a 7 out of 10 for Lance Stroll. Zhou Guanyu in next, an 11th place finish for him, and I think that was a fantastic job from Zhou. He had a really good start. He started 17th, made up some good places early on. And then he was up to 10th and up in some points at one point, didn't it? And it's a real shame that he didn't nick some points there for him. He kind of deserved it for that race. Overall, he was solid, much better than his teammate. I'm giving him a 9 out of 10. It could have been 10, to be honest, because I think that's a fantastic job from that car, especially given where his teammate ended up. Well done, Joe, for that one. Next up is Kevin Magnussen, and he finished in 12th place, and I think he can be really happy with his race result. He'll be not too happy with his qualifying. He finished 5 places behind, or started 5 places behind his teammate on Friday. And yeah, he'll be... Yeah, the car will be promising because it's a circuit that was tough on tyres, and the car came through that, and they were in there with some points, and be hoping potentially, you know, with the car that they've said that isn't going to be great, it's... Well, much better than the Alpines, isn't it? Let's put it that way, and he'll be happy with that. I think I'm going to go for an 8 out of 10 for Kevin Magnussen, a really solid weekend from him. And then came Daniel Ricciardo in the 13th place, and he had not a great race, wasn't he? He was comfortably behind his teammate Yuki Tsunoda in the end. The strategy to pull him onto the softs worked, but it wasn't fast enough, was he? Even with the softs, he wasn't so much faster than Yuki. Yuki let him pass to have a go at Kevin Magnussen. Couldn't make the move on that, and he sort of kept that place and really only beat his teammate because he was ordered, you know, teammate ordered to let him past. A weekend I think that Daniel Ricciardo will be disappointed for, and I think overall there was a lot of hype about this Racing Bulls team, wasn't it, with them having the, you know, hand-me-down parts from Red Bull, and it's not really gone as strongly as they thought. But yeah, hoping for better from Daniel Ricciardo next time out. I'm giving him a 5 out of 10. And directly behind him is teammate Yuki Tsunoda, and I think he had a really good race, didn't he, to be honest with you. He was right up in there for some points. Yes, he's finished behind Daniel Ricciardo only due to team orders. Didn't have the pace or the straight line pace to get behind Hülkenberg and pass them down the straight, did they? It was something that they really struggled with. Is that because of the extra drag on that car? I'm not so sure, but yeah, solid race from Yuki, and I think he'd be overall happy. He was disappointed probably with the team orders and the way that all worked out for him in the end, but I'm giving him a 7 out of 10 because I think he was solid this weekend. Alex Albon up next. He finished in 15th place, started 2 places up, didn't he, in 13th, and yeah, this was a strange one. I don't know if it was just the strategy was wrong because they went so long on that first one. Did that, you know, I thought that might set him up well for the rest of the race, but it didn't really quite work that way, did it, in the end? He went for the hard, and with that longer first section, I thought maybe they might throw on some softs in the end to make him a bit racy, potentially nick some points on there, but it just wasn't to be, was it, for the Williams outfit? And yeah, I think he'll be disappointed because he's fallen backwards from where he qualified, but overall, you know, decent-ish weekend. A 5 out of 10 for Alex. Nico Hülkenberg up next, and he finished in 16th place in the end, and he'll be horribly disappointed because it was a lap 1 incident which really scuppered his race. He was way back 20th, and he must have had some damage because he was never really making any impression on the race from there. He only beat people that had, really had car issues, and massively disappointed stops from there. But yeah, it's such a shame because his 1 lap place is so fantastic, but in race he's beaten again by his teammate Kevin Magnussen. Kind of what we saw last season, wasn't it, from Nico Hülkenberg? So I'll be hoping for better next time out. A 5 out of 10 because it was his mistake that really cost him on that one. And then came the 2 Alpines, and it was Ocon that beats his teammate. I mean, that's the only highlight that he can have of this race weekend. He started ahead of his teammate in 19th, he finished 17th. They were just so slow throughout. A 5 out of 10 for Ocon. His teammate Pierre Gasly started last, and he was again finished in 18th place, and yeah, he'll have a lot of head scratching to do because the Alpine was shockingly slow, wasn't it, throughout pretty much all of the race weekend. No big incidents, but they were just so far back, weren't they, in the end. A 4 out of 10 because he's been beaten by his teammate on both qualifying and the race. Valtteri Bottas, he finished in 19th place in the end, and really he wasn't making any massive impression on the race, was he? Yes, he had that big 50-second stop, which really put him way out at the back in the end, but he wasn't really making any big impressions on the race up until that stage. I'm giving him a 4 out of 10. And then Logan Sargent, who rounds up the last place, and yeah, it just hasn't been very good at all, was it, from him? Poor qualifying 18th place, finished in last. I'm sure there must have been some issue because the way he outbraked himself and took so long to get going on lap 10, he was 35 seconds down on Valtteri Bottas at the end, and I'm sure he must have been carrying something, because if he was really that slow, I think the Williams would have a lot of questions of whether they'll be good enough to stay there. But yeah, 2 out of 10 for me for Logan Sargent on this weekend, and a season where he's got a lot of pressure on to sort of show why Williams have kept him. It's not gone off at the best foot. But yeah, up next, Saudi Arabia. Can't wait for the action to get going. Not long to wait. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment as always. See you next time.